just would mention to the panel and get your reaction that science also requires communication. And I think Alice Hamilton exhibited that by, in a number of ways, targeting her writing of government documents, creating what is, I agree, a very delightful, fascinating autobiography that's written at a level that's accessible to people of many different education levels and backgrounds. And so anyways, I also think that science requires communication.
I agree with you completely.
Okay. Leslie.
Just in
you have to talk.
Just in response to the autobiography question, I was saying to, I think to Mike earlier, and he'll have to show you the book he brought on Alice Hamilton, but that when you go to Amazon, and you know if you go to Amazon, people can write comments or reviews, and there was one on exploring the dangerous trades, and the guy says, he gives it like 3 stars, instead of 5 or whatever it is. And he gives it 3 stars because he thought it was just too gossipy. So just in the spirit of it's very readable, it's also a lot about personality, and so it is fun to read on that level as well.
As far as the book goes, in our field, we're not MDs. There aren't a lot of doctor industrial hygienists. There aren't a lot of books written about famous industrial hygienists. All right, we're all hopeful, but as my daughter is growing up, it's one of these things. What do you do, Dad? And of course, anybody who became an industrial hygienist, your whole family asks you that. What exactly, So I found this book, The Worker's Detective, a story about Dr. Alice Hamilton. And probably, 5th grade, I gave it to my daughter, 6th grade, and let her read it. And it really is a summary of the dangerous trades and things. It's a great little book just to kind of get her started. And of course, it didn't work. My daughter went over to the dark side. She's going to be an attorney, but what can I say?
I just wanted to make a comment to Dr. Murray's comments that I certainly agree with you that there is a purpose to science and all knowledge and to make a better world. But I think there's subtleties in this that elude some of us in academia in particular, where we lose track of whether we are being the scientist or activist at the time. And what I'm referring to is that the basis of science really is doubting your own results, and the basis of activism is knowing the results. So there's certainty and uncertainty there. And sometimes I think some of us in academia who really do want to be activists tend to forget that we have to obey the science first, because if we don't, we demean the science and undercut our own activism, ultimately when it's found out that we are distorting the results. So I'd like to hear your comments on that.
I think this is an important. I don't want to say dichotomy because I don't want to prejudice my remarks that much. This is an important tension, and in America particularly, we worry about that tension a lot. But I think we can learn from the social sciences, which is a much more complicated process, that there are dialectical relationships. I think it's a healthy tension, but I don't think we should be afraid of putting the two together. I mean, after all, it's sort of hard for me to separate, well, when exactly am I a woman, or when am I black, or when am I a mother or a grandmother? All these things come together. If you're doing good science, and certainly people doing good science can disagree. I'm not suggesting that there can't be disagreements. But if you're doing good science, which very much, not only is it communication, but it's a collective process. So it's not like one scientist does the work and has, quote, the truth or anything like that. It's a collective process, and it's an evolving process. So what we know to be true in 1911 may not be what we know to be true 100 years later. So what I would say to students is don't be afraid of that intermingling. And it's certainly true in the United States, and particularly true in our field, occupational health and safety, that the politics involved makes our area a very polarizing area. So at one level, what you're saying, Paul, I agree with. If you're a young academic, you want to be thoughtful about how you present your science, because you don't want your career ruined just because you're trying to keep kids from getting lead poisoning. So you have to be clever, just like you do when you're an organizer. I mean, you have to be thoughtful and careful about what you're doing. But I don't see them as opposites, and I don't see them as a dichotomy that we can never mix. I think it's critical to mix them. I think most people I know, when they write for the peer-reviewed literature, don't say power to the people in their methodology section. But they better hope that they understand that if they want their paper to have any meaning. So I think one of the things we can help students understand is that they have to find a way to deal with all of these aspects of the field in a useful and thoughtful and disciplined way. But I absolutely think that you cannot separate the objective methodological discussion of observations from the impassioned understanding of what you want to do with those observations. But then, I'm a little weird.
3 short questions from Mr. Ramirez. What happened to the worker? What happened to the contractor? And who's watching out for the health and safety of immigrant workers in Chicago?
Those are all good questions.
Okay, you need to use the microphone too, sorry.
All right. The worker, from what I understand, was married and is still married and is still in the process of rehabilitating, was the last I had heard, is about a year ago. I tried to find out who exactly this worker was, but I can't get the name, which I understand why. And I'm trying to get the name of the contractor because I want to make sure that person's out of business if it's the last thing I do, right? And the last question was what's being done to help immigrant workers. And well, yeah, look, it's a constant struggle. I mean, we've gone about this in different ways. Anywhere we can get some traction for it, we will. We had a good development with the Archdiocese of Chicago. Actually, it's the first diocese in the nation to have an Office of Immigrant Affairs, which Cardinal George set that up, I think, within the last 6 months. The only trick with that is that we have to try to help raise money to fund it and fund the work that they do to help immigrants. So we're trying to do that. We're going to have a dinner for them and be part of that to try to help money to let them do their work, to do a lot of outreach to immigrant populations here. I can deal with it from one very narrow perspective in labor. We try to help as much as we can in many different areas, but it's very difficult. My home local had a raid on one of their plants right on the Illinois-Iowa border, a meatpacking plant. And it was terrible what happened in there. And these are the folks, the local that I came out of was UFCW Local 1546. It was a meatpacking local. And that's where our roots were in the meatpacking industry. And, every time something like that happens, it drives us crazy, because, these folks are here to work. They're not here to vacation. They're here to, to make a better life for them and for their families. And I think what folks like to do, I think it's a lazy approach towards it, but they just think that all immigrants are here to take something away from them or do something bad. But we have to start pointing out things to them to say, look, these are folks, whether you agree with whether or not they should be here, you should at least acknowledge that they are contributing to the tax base, for one. And two, I mean, you pick an issue that's important to folks. I heard somebody talking about Social Security, and I said, link that to immigration. These are folks that, if they're here illegally, are paying into into a Social Security system that they will never draw from. They know that they'll never draw from, and so they're giving money in the millions and hundreds of millions of dollars worth over time, into a system that they know they'll never be able to take advantage of, over time. So there's just more to it. I mean, the way that we try to deal with it is anytime we get a chance to make a link to what it means to have an immigrant population that needs to be recognized, we try to do it. We try to take advantage of those links, and it's tough. I was hopeful at the beginning of this administration that we would have meaningful immigration reform. It was what was promised within the first 30 days. It hasn't happened yet, and it's been 2 years. It's not likely that it will happen now that we're not set up for it legislatively, because we don't control both houses anymore. And it looks like this is going to be, and it goes back to the political part of it. What are the politics of our time? I think every time you look at something in history, an event, you should always go back and try to get a feel for what the politics of the time were, because I think it's going to just open all kinds of other thoughts and considerations that need to be balanced and taken into account. So it's a constant struggle every day. Every time we have an opportunity to do something to help in that area, we try to do it. But it's tough when the politics of the day are not, there's no wind blowing in this direction. It's kind of just a dead standstill right now, and I think it's something that really needs to be, taken into consideration, especially the example that I gave with not even allowing this, immigrant pool to purchase into the exchange, for health care. That's a real problem. It's a huge problem for us, and I think it's something that we're going to have to address sooner or later because something's going to happen. Something unfortunate, more than likely, but it needs to be addressed. Oh, and one last observation. You mentioned President Trump. I didn't know this, but for those of you who don't know who he is, the president of the National AFL-CIO. Every male member of his family has died of black lung. I was talking to him not too long ago, and I asked him why he was passionate about, occupational safety and health, or health and safety, and he said he just blurted it out. Said every male member of my family has died of black lung. And he goes, and I'm still alive, but I don't know what I'm going to die from yet. So he's passionate about it, and I think it's kind of permeated the rest of the organization.